Hello. Today, my group will be discussing one of the most influential movements of the 1960s, the Students for a Democratic Society. Throughout this presentation, we will be demonstrating how Students for a Democratic Society eminently critiqued the Vietnam War, the American political system, and our capitalistic economy, as well as social injustice. They also called upon the voices of students to promote change in this society through a variety of ways. The Students for a Democratic Society was formed in 1960 as the student version of the already popular League for Industrial Democracy, a socialist educational organization formed in 1921. This student-led organization focused on creating new standards for the American political life. While many members identified themselves as Democrats and Socialists, Students for a Democratic Society preached inclusion for all political beliefs. Led by American activist and founding president of SDS, Alan Haber, the SDS movement was launched with the famous Port Huron Statement, created at University of Michigan. The Port Huron Statement was the guiding document for Students for a Democratic Society. It laid out their goals, primary focus, and stance on different ideologies and social constructs dominating the culture of the late 1960s, such as violence, student participation, and American democracy. In regards to violence, they believed the concept was repulsive because it involved the objectification of a community or person, turning them into an object of hate. When discussing students, they felt students had lost their way in regards to their duty to participate in government. Students in the 1960s were slowly becoming bystanders, and they feared universities would lose what once gave them meaning. They realized that this country was going to be inherited by students, so students needed to start caring about it. Next, they discussed the once great value of democracy that American citizens had lost track of throughout their activities in war. They warned that the current political climate was slowly undermining the idea of democracy due to the rise and irresponsible power of the military. The Port Huron Statement asked the questions everyone was wondering. How will we end the war? How can we increase democracy? What policies and structural alternatives are needed to obtain these? To which Students for a Democratic Society gave this answer. We must control our military, and we have to come together as one united nation to accomplish this goal. They stated, the United States' principal goal should be creating a world where hunger, poverty, disease, ignorance, violence, and exploitation are replaced as central features by abundance, reason, love, and international cooperation. Instead of a world fueled by hatred and destruction, their call to action was one of peace and cooperation. Political parties needed to come together in order to better America, and while they waited for that to occur, it was the obligation of students to speak up. While they waited for change, SDS decided that they would be the political party for the people. This was their rally cry as they began a movement that would last a decade and spread a message that would continue even to this day. They believed if they didn't speak up for those who could not, no one would. And if no one would, unspeakable things would occur to this country.
During the height of its activity, the SDS critiqued many issues in society, including racism, war, and the government. With regards to racism, SDS was engaged with the civil rights movement and participated in many protests and demonstrations regarding current events. For example, members of the SDS protested the murder of Bobby Joe Phillips, who was a black man that was brutally beaten by the San Antonio Police Department, even though he offered little to no resistance when they disarmed him and arrested him. In addition, SDS protested war, especially the Vietnam and Cold Wars. SDS strongly opposed the wars and actively disputed the drafting of students during this time. Due to its focus on peace during the Cold War, the SDS opposed nuclear weapons and the resulting destruction. SDS encouraged the disarming of all nations, suggesting that America should be the leader in this movement. Although we know that this pacifism and disarmament never took hold in mainstream thought, SDS eagerly encouraged peace and civil rights. SDS challenged its members and the greater society to be active members of political processes and decisions. Members of the SDS wanted to encourage people to be directly involved in policy formation and protest with what they do not agree. Students became more involved in politics through SDS, and members of the SDS encouraged them to do so, claiming that the students have a duty to participate in society and are completely capable of doing so. The SDS is helpful for providing students with the knowledge, right judgment, and confidence to participate in politics in many ways. SDS members asserted that participation in politics was not limited to voting, and so focused on many forms of activism to encourage the average student to participate in political activities.
World War II was a war where America tried to serve as a peacemaker. Vietnam came quickly, and many felt that it didn't need to happen. The SDS used strikes as one method of critique. Two major strikes included the Columbia Strike and the student strikes at Kent and Jackson State. The Columbia Strike protested the university's involvement with the Pentagon because of its racist treatment of residents of Morningside Heights. The student strikes protested the government killings in the Vietnam War and its expansion into Cambodia. The SDS participated in anti-war movements. They conducted a march on Washington in April of 1965. The march was used to invigorate people and to get them fighting for the causes of the SDS. The SDS provided teach-ins on college campuses. These kept the students and faculty informed of political events happening in the world. An underlying intention was to get more students involved in the SDS. The Weathermen were a branch of radical SDS members who used violence towards those that they perceived as enemies. Commemorative statues of policemen were blown up by the Weathermen 2 days before the Days of Rage in October of 1969. The Days of Rage were 3 days filled with violence, including the breaking of a car and building windows, riots between the Weathermen and cops, marches, and the destruction of numerous stores.
Today, the SDS is still active but looks a little different than it did in the 1960s. It was reformed in 2006 and it has chapters all across the United States. It has been especially active following the 2016 election and the events that have occurred since then. Today, the main critiques of SDS are similar to those of its original organization with a few additional modern issues. The SDS critiques war, xenophobia, racism, sexism, white supremacy, homophobia, transphobia, and rising tuition costs. Their main method of imminent critique today is campaigning, which they feel is much more effective than working with the administration on campuses. Additionally, other aspects of their imminent critique include being entirely student-led, completely volunteer, and not affiliated with any political party. Why should we, as students at Regis University, care about the historical significance of SDS? Although the original organization dissolved in the 1970s, it was still an extremely effective movement that resulted in progress and change. The successes of SDS demonstrates that student voices are powerful and important, and that by partaking in imminent critique of the culture in which we operate, we have the power to bring about change. As students at a university, we are in a unique position to use imminent critique and the resources available to us to speak up for what is right and bring about positive cultural change.